What is sleep to you?
Most people, they go to sleep and they wake up not being able to remember what happened. Okay? I remember everything.
This is Crish Langan, the man with the 200 IQ. Listening to him completely changed the way I see sleep and dreams.
In other words, when I dream, I'm conscious of the dream. On some level, I see what's happening. People talk about lucid dreaming. I don't necessarily get into the dream and try to change it. Instead, I just watch it, what happens. Something is trying to communicate with me, about something that's going to happen, already did happen, some situation that exists. And so I'm going to pay attention to that communication. And I'm going to try to decode this when I wake up.
Now, is that dream different dimensional dream, a different reality when you sleep? What is that when we dream?
That's a language. All of these things like that gorilla in your dream, those are symbols. They're the symbols of a language. So what happens is when you have a dream, it is actually speaking a certain language to you. What you've got to do then is try to interpret the dream, which means finding out what that language is trying to tell you. There was a message here. Okay, how am I going to decode that message? So you work with the symbols you've got, and you can usually figure it out. I mean, if you actually put things to, how does this relate to that? How does that relate to this? You can actually put those things together and come up with a reasonable interpretation of what the message was.
Steven Greer shares a similar view on dreams, seeing them as a separate reality that can be controlled. Please pay attention.
How is it that during the dream time, you have a crystal clear, full color dream, and whatever that is in that dream happens the next day or next week or the next month or 10 years later? How does that happen? Think about it. A thing that is experienced by almost every human at some point in their life, that's a sort of a signpost that says, you're not only what you think you are.
All I'm going to do is help you remember who you really are and give you some techniques that facilitate the sharpening of that ability. You can begin to practice that on a nightly basis, and as you do it, you will be stunned at how accurate you will become in getting that information. Ritambara Pragya, the level where all things can be known. Everything can be known, past, present, future. What you have just heard, I would say a handful of people on Earth know, even in classified projects. It's highly compartmented. I'm going to share in a moment a few of these sort of techniques. Most people overthink it, but also they don't believe they can do it. And that's the beginning of programming yourself for failure. So what we want to do is hit the reset button, reprogram ourselves for success and for being able to do it. And all I'm going to do is help you remember who you really are and give you some techniques that facilitate the sharpening of that ability. That's really all I can do. The rest you're doing yourself. Sharing right now is key to understanding the psychological and even physical dynamics of consciousness and non-locality and how it can be manifested. The ability to be a seer of a remote place or a remote time into the future. They're all easily accomplished if you understand the science and the fundamental knowledge of consciousness, its nature.
You're not only what you think you are, locked in the frame of your physical form and in this time and place. You're actually connected in consciousness to every point in space and every point in time. And that includes right now, but going back, but going also forward, which is remote viewing into the future. This is something that has been unfortunately sort of relegated to mysticism, and a lot of thinking is that, well, you've got to be somebody living in a cave 50 years by yourself to experience this. This is absolutely a harmful myth that I think ecclesiastical and spiritual leaders, and unfortunately a lot of my scientific brethren, have propagated. That is a damnable lie. You do not have to be in some kind of esoteric ascetic setting to have that experience or to develop them. And so that is something that we have to begin to sort of move beyond this monkey on our shoulders going, oh, I'm just a little dumb thing and I'm just stuck right here on Earth. And it's just, you're telling yourself that lie over and over again. And that becomes its own destiny. Because if you have a different understanding of who and what you are, And that is that you are a conscious being capable of connecting to the field of consciousness that's beyond space and time.
The reason that the deeper elements of the intelligence community don't want the public to know is that, first of all, it is extremely efficient spycraft, which they don't want others to have. Secondly, they know that if people understood the power of consciousness, they would be able to completely change the direction of the planet.
You can see any place, you can see any point in time. You need to understand that this is your innate capability as a higher intelligent life form. Once you reach a critical mass of intelligence and consciousness, you can understand this and routinely see remote places and see distant times.
That's how I think you should begin to think of how your life can be guided, and your relationships at work and family can be guided. Very intuitive. Those of you who are critical, remember that there's science and there's objective knowledge and intellect, and then there's the consciousness that can sense and feel and know. And if you develop this ability, you will save lives. And in your normal everyday work, whoever you are, I mean, if you're a teacher and you're dealing with a student, intuiting what that person needs and what you need to teach, you following this? Be with me for a moment. What I would like to do now is just do an experiment taking you through these steps, and you can do this at home. If you're in a group of 3 or 4 people, you know, get a box or a basket, and one person goes out of the room and puts any object in it, and the others have no idea. Now, here are the steps to it. Step 1, if you're going to not just do it on the fly instantly, you go into this quiet state of meditation and forget about targeting what you're remote viewing. Just stick with the process of experiencing the awake mind and do the meditation technique using either the breathing technique or the mantra or both, or whatever fires your rocket. And when you're in a deep, quiet state, instead of guessing what is in the box, just let your mind rest on it and ask to know what it is. You might see it. You might get the word for it. You may get an aspect of it. The key thing is to not intellectualize it or start just guessing like some kind of parlor trick or kindergarten game. And that's what most people do. So you have to kind of be brutally honest with yourself. Am I sensing this, or I'm just guessing? Now, initially, you may not know. Your mind may start pulling in all sorts of things. The other thing to understand is that what the mind does, here's the trick, and this is the real art and science of this. When you begin to sense something, you will begin to get something that is an accurate, objectively true remote view data point. And then the mind will start doing the monkey mind thing and leapfrog ahead of the process of just sensing and knowing what it is and filling in the blanks from your memory store. How do you distinguish and discern the difference? Practice, practice. Because the more you practice it, the more you're going to realize when you're doing that and when you're not. And I will say this, if you do this often enough, this technique I just described with a box or something else where you don't know what it is, you'll begin to know what it feels like in your heart, in your gut, when it's an accurate perception. And you'll know what it feels like when it was just something that your mind began to confabulate and make up. Dream time. I mentioned this before you went to bed. You're asleep. So as you're going to sleep, get a journal, keep something by your bedside, and begin to affirm to yourself that you can have lucid dreaming. Be awake within the dream, and you can travel to places and know things in that state. You can begin to practice that on a nightly basis, and as you do it, it'll begin to go up and up and up in accuracy. I have found that if you're in a very deep, relaxed state, or even taking a nap, but you just gently intend as you're going in and out of the dream state or sleep state or in and out of the quiet meditative state to know something. It's an intending. And then just relax and let it flow into you. And get yourself out of the way. So get your intellect and ego out of the way. It'll pop in like that. The other is when you're going to sleep, or mostly when you're waking up. You're coming out of sleep into the waking state, but you're kind of in that drowsy, half awake, half asleep state, but you're rested. At that juncture, the junction between dream and sleep and waking, when you're relaxed, intend to know something, ask to see something, ask to have a problem solved. You will be stunned at how accurate you will become in getting that information. Practice the remote viewing every day, every minute of every day. Be in a mindful state. Develop at least 2 to 3 times a day this practice of deep, quiet meditation, remote viewing practice, and you'll be stunned at how quickly you advance.